The Colts still have positional needs ahead of the NFL draft and as we still go through free agency. So, which positions still need the most talent to be added? Will it be through free agency, the NFL draft for a roster remedy? And how do you, the fans, rank the positional needs for Indianapolis? Well, let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Indianapolis Colts on SI.com. My name is Drake Wally, deputy editor for the site and co-host of the show. And of course, we have got one and Noah Gebert, fellow analyst for the site and co-host of the show. Man, we've talked a lot about free agency. We've talked a lot about the draft, fits and all this stuff. But there's been big impact signings and whatnot. But there is still needs on this roster.
Mhm.
Really, there's areas of the roster where, despite the fact that there have been signings and additions, the Indianapolis Colts have got to do more to be able to get over the hump of 8 or 9 wins to potentially get the divisional crown for the first time in 10 years and, of course, make the playoffs. Noah, how are you doing on this beautiful Thursday? As you can see, the sun is beating me in the face. I need to get some blinds, but how are you doing, man?
Yeah, man, it's been nice. I like ever since the time change, we've had some sunlight coming on during these live shows.
Yeah.
We get a little bit better lighting in both of our rooms. Yeah, I've liked it. Uh, as far as Colts, I mean, it's been kind of quiet lately, but I think that's kind of what you expect based on the spending spree that they went on in that first wave of free agency that we had. You're not really expecting them to keep that up and sign addition day after day like they were. I think there was like a 5 or 6 day streak where they had an outside free agent come in every day. At some point, that's got to come to an end. So we're in a little bit of a lull, but this is, I think, a good time to take a step back and address where the roster's at and what still needs to be done. Because we know we're going to see a few more veteran additions coming in through that second and third waves of free agency, maybe even some veteran additions that come in post draft. With some of the, once you get through that draft and you realize we haven't really addressed this the way we wanted to, then you'll see the Colts add some competition at that point. But yeah, I mean, still a lot more work to do, but I think at this point it's a good time to evaluate where they're at.
Yeah, and absolutely. So we got to before we even dive into this, we got Matthew Sundberg here. Thank you so much for joining, my friend. How are we doing, Horseshoe Huddle? It's been a solid free agent period for the Colts. It absolutely has. This is definitely the most aggressive that I've seen Chris Ballard. I can't remember even Ryan Grigson being so aggressive like this. So we'll have to see how it all pans out. But so far, it's been pretty damn good. I will say that. Sean Conkright, good to see you again. And of course, Matthew Sundberg dropping a super chat here right out of the gate, just setting the tone for the show. Thank you so much. Ideal draft strategy for the first round. Trade up, trade back. We got something here that we aren't even covering in this episode. I love it. I love this kind of question. We'll both answer this. I think that if you're sitting at 14, this is what I would do.
Yeah.
I think if you're sitting at 14 and the 11th pick, 10th, 11th, maybe even 12th pick rolls around, and Tyler Warren is sitting there, it'd be really tempting to not try to trade up. It really would, because we'll get into it later, but they desperately need to help their tight end room. So I'm in favor of a trade up. I think that Ballard's been aggressive. I think that he might be aggressive in the draft too. Again, his job's on the line. What do you think, Noah? You think you should just sit there at 14 and see what comes to you?
No, I don't know if this is my personal strategy here or what we think Chris Ballard will do, but I think just the theme of this offseason so far has been like get it over the finish line and get your guy. So I wouldn't really be surprised if we saw a trade up, if we see somebody the Colts really like, maybe a Jahad Campbell, Tyler Warren, somebody like that slip into the early teens there, and maybe the Colts jump up and snag that guy just to make sure they get the difference maker that they've pinned that they want. As for me personally, I think I'm always going to be trade back. It's never going to be the sexy move that happens in the draft, especially that first round when you're waiting around. It seems like pick 14 takes about 2 hours for you to get there. So it's never going to be exciting for fans to see a trade back. But I think just statistically, like stats seem to back it up. Like you don't have that much of a lower chance of hitting on your pick when you pick in the late 20s than you do in picking somewhere in the teens. So if you can recoup some picks and move back and still kind of have that same percentage shot to get your guy or to get an impact player in the first round, I'm always going to be team trade back. I think we lost the sound on you, Drake.
I decided to mute myself and just throw you all off. So, just to very briefly kind of put a cap on this, trading back, man, even just trading back a couple spots,
Yeah.
you can still get a guy, you can still get more picks. And the fact that Noah is team trade back, that's why Ballard does it so much.
Yeah.
That's why he does it so much. He likes to recoup those picks. He's confident in how he can perform as a GM on days 2 and 3. And also, I mean, I want Tyler Warren, I do, but like you also have Colston Loveland. You
Yeah.
also have Mason Taylor. You've got multiple guys you can get at tight end. I just really think that that's a position they have to address. But as more people come into the chat here, we're going to go ahead and dive into this. So we obviously have 8 position groups that we're going to cover.
There's
We're going to
about
go
all of
from
them. So
yeah, we're going to go from least important and least needed for more talent all the way down the pipe to the number one. Gotta have something, gotta sign someone, draft someone. We'll probably, since it's free agency still, we'll probably keep it to more of like, do they need to add some free agents here? Because I think that the big impact signings have happened, not just for the Colts, but for a lot of these teams. So the first one right here, it's one that I think that Chris Ballard already put a massive, massive emphasis on. We saw it with the Charvarius Ward signing, of course. But right here it is. It is cornerback. Now, so Noah, just before we even dive into it here, what is your overall thought, I guess, and we'll kind of do this for each one of these, but just kind of looking from an eagle-eye point of view,
yeah.
what's your thought on the Indianapolis Colts cornerback room right now as it stands?
Yeah. Well, I think this is satisfying just to put this down here at number 8, because I think coming into free agency, that would have been a 1 or 2 for a lot of people. Just going into that, seeing that group, I think especially on the outside, you needed help, and you add somebody like Charvarius Ward, who it's been stated he's going to follow the team's number 1 guy, so he's going to play outside, he's going to play in the slot, he's just going to try to lock down the main offensive threat on every opponent that they're facing this next season. Where I kind of struggle is the depth there at the nickel spot. I think you don't really have anybody behind Kenny Moore. You might need to sign a third safety or something, or just a straight up nickel corner to play backup in that spot. Because if Kenny Moore goes down, I don't really know what the plan is there or what the situation is there. You've got a guy in Cam Bynum who knows how to play a little bit of that role. But as far as outside corner spots, I really like where the Colts are at. I like that they have Charvarius Ward as that undisputed CB1 in the room, and then you've got those, I guess, 3 young guys duking it out for that other outside corner spot, with Jalen Jones, I think, leading the way or having the advantage going into camp. And then you've got Juju Brents, who can stay healthy, Sam Womack, who's played outside well this past season at least. Then I think you feel good about having competition at one of those spots. I don't think you feel good last year where you had competition at every spot and pretty much every snap was up for grabs. So it's good to have a little bit of solidity there with adding Charvarius Ward, and I really think that just kind of rounded out the cornerback depth room. But yeah, that hole there at nickel, or at the backup nickel, I think that's what leaves this on the list. I think if you had that spot kind of locked down, maybe that cornerback position just gets erased from the team needs entirely. But I still think you have room to add there.
Yeah, and looking at the chart right now, so on the left outside corner, this is our lads, which is what I use. So we got Jalen Jones, then Juju Brents, then David Long Jr. Now, David Long is a special teamer. All right, if David Long's out there playing football for you on defense, that means that you've sustained some pretty significant injuries. But then, of course, on the right side, you have the new addition, Charvarius Ward, then Sam Womack. Then it kind of stops there. That is solid. Those are solid outside corners. Your top 4 are guys who have given you enough on-field sample, right, that you're comfortable. But when you do get to Kenny Moore the second, you have Corey Ballantyne behind him and then Alex Johnson, who is not even a guarantee to make the roster. Yeah. So probably more of a camp body, practice squad guy, maybe even a cut candidate.
Yeah, I would say even those 2 guys, Alex Johnson and Corey Ballantyne. I think Corey Ballantyne hasn't played a ton of defensive snaps, and when he has, it's been outside for the most part. So interesting to see our lads put him there in the nickel. I'm not sure the Colts are going to view him as that. And then Alex Johnson, I think, coming out of the draft, was a guy that everyone kind of projected to stay inside and play the nickel, a bit of a taller nickel. I think he's around 6'1", 196. So I mean, nickel as a prospect, but I don't. There's no indication that the Colts see him as that either. So he could or could not be on the outside. If they don't see either of those guys as nickels, then they've got literally nobody backing up Kenny Moore at that spot.
Yeah, and as far as addressing this, there is one name in free agency that stands out to me, and there's nothing in the NFL, especially for a new coach, coordinator, whatever, like
Mhm.
familiarity, like a guy well. Mike Hilton stands out to me. It's a guy that I'm not sure if they can sign him because I mean he is 31 years old. He's got 8 years in the NFL, and the thing is, maybe he wants more playing time.
Yeah.
I just don't see how he would be expensive. I really don't. And he knows Lou Anarumo. Anarumo used him probably the best that he's ever played in his career. So what do you think about that signing? Do you think the Colts, this being our least, ranked, I guess, for additional talent needs position, do you think that they need to go out and sign a guy, or do you think, hey, the NFL draft, man, you probably pick yourself up a slot corner, maybe day 2, maybe day 3?
Yeah, I think even that slot corner could maybe come after the draft as a veteran free agent that just hadn't signed somewhere else. I don't. This is so low on the list for me personally. Full disclosure, I was the one who ranked these positions, so I'm sure you'll have some arguments as we go down the list, and we'll definitely be excited to bring those up and talk about them. But yeah, I don't. Mike Hilton bringing him into the room, I think that makes the cornerback room a little crowded. Honestly, I wouldn't hate it. Obviously, you want to have the problem where you have too many good players. You want to get to the end of training camp, and you would much rather cut a good player than keep a bad player. You want to be in that situation in your cornerback room. So I mean, maybe even Mike Hilton would be a guy that could potentially bump out to safety if you're in a pinch. I think there's ways that you could get him on the field even with the current cornerback room. Uh, and I think the Colts could make it work cap wise. I'm not sure really what the price he's going to be commanding is, but the Colts do have quite a bit of wiggle room and flexibility at this point. But yeah, I don't think you need to make the kind of investment that Mike Hilton would kind of require to fill that depth spot. I think you could probably do that in the later rounds of the draft or after the draft, signing another veteran.
Yeah. Now, this is a position that, just to put a bow on this one, just a couple weeks ago, if me and Noah were doing this episode,
Mhm.
people, this would have probably been number one,
Yeah.
maybe number two. It's hard to fight with tight end, but I do have to say it's not often we've done this on the show. But before we move on, Chris Ballard truly stuck to his word when he said that he was going to do something about the secondary.
Mhm.
So I'll give him that. And so that's why it's the lowest on our list, is because it's hard to find additional spots. Right now, you have 7 guys. You've got everyone but Alex Johnson,
Mhm.
basically, is a lock almost to make this roster. 7 cornerbacks. That's quite a few to have. We'll see if they do address slot corner here. But yeah. So and you know what, Chetman, nice to finally catch one of these
Mhm.
live in a long while. Hope everyone's having a nice evening. Well, we are happy that you are with us, and we are very happy that you get to see us live. Nothing like having all the support of you live viewers. Thank you so much again. So this next position really wasn't a big one, a big need. It still kind of isn't, but
Yeah.
now you're looking at this position room with the departure of one Dio Dangbo. Like, hey, you might need some depth there.
Mhm.
Uncertainty on Samson Ebukam's return from an Achilles injury, and that's defensive edge. Chris Ballard is obsessed with this position,
Mhm.
especially this position. He's obsessed with the whole trenches concept of offense and defense, but he absolutely cannot stop himself from just packing that roster full of edge rushers. So
Yeah.
overall, what's your thought on this room right now? It is a little bit different without Dio
Yeah.
Dangbo. It's not entirely that critical. That's why it's 7th on our list. And by the way, so far, I'm looking at this whole list, and I don't disagree with anything that you've ranked. So give me your thoughts on the edge room. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, I think with the loss of Dio Dangbo, maybe you're looking for another guy who could be an inside-out kind of rusher, a guy who on base downs is going to be out there on the edge, but on third down can bump inside, take a Grover Stewart off the field, and get some more rush on the interior. That's kind of what Dio Dangbo provided you. There is another guy on the roster in Tyquan Lewis who provides a similar thing. And we'll kind of see how Lou Anarumo prioritizes that in his defenses here with Indianapolis. But and throughout the Colts and Chris Ballard's tenure, those have been guys that Chris Ballard has continually targeted and tried to get on that roster. hence Taekwon Lewis and the contract that he re-signed. I think the interesting conversation that you're having when you're talking about the edge defenders on the current roster is there's only one in Laiatu Latu who's under contract after this season. So you're kind of questioning what the long-term approach is going to be at edge. I mean, you've got Laiatu Latu locked up for another 3 years, but then you've got all these guys on contract years and Isaiah Land, Samson Ebukam, Kwity Paye, Taekwon Lewis. I think Darrell Nchami is kind of a camp body name, but still a guy who's on a 1 year deal. So yeah, I mean, I think the draft is where you would go if you're trying to address this position more in the long term because like we said, I mean, it's going to take some resources to bring some of these guys back after their contracts are over. So having a cheap rookie deal at that position, I think, is always going to be valuable.
Yeah, and right now we're looking at the depth chart here. So on the left, now this is our lads, and I think that what Noah mentioned, about Corey Ballantyne maybe not being a slot guy. This is so early in the depth chart,
Yeah.
I guess, finalization that some of these are not going to be, 100%. You can also move guys, but what it says is you've got Kwity Paye, then Laiatu Latu, and Darrell Nchami, who is probably, again, more of your practice squad guy. But then on the other end, you've got Samson Ebukam as the starter. You've got Taekwon Lewis, who is as good of a rotational piece as you can find in the league. And then you, of course, have Isaiah Land, who does have some prowess. I mean, he's got some allure. It's a guy that hasn't gotten a lot of playing time, but when he has gotten playing time, he's got a motor. And it's really good to see him out there, utilizing that defensive motor. I'm looking at this depth chart, and it's not really that bad. I think that if they address this, there's a lot of ways they can do it, but I would say you might even just pick a guy in the draft because, man, you're looking at the free agents here. I mean, there's names like, okay, the ones that stick out the most. Matt Judon, who plays more of that linebacker spot, but he can absolutely rush the passer. Clearly, he's done a phenomenal job of that. Von Miller, Zadarius Smith is a guy that you could maybe get for a cheaper deal. He's 32 going on 33. You've got, Foley Fudukasi. Everybody knows him. If you follow the Colts or you're a Texans fan, he's been in the AFC South for a while. I think he was with the Jaguars before. Then you've got Emmanuel Agba. There's names that stick out that you can just add. I mean, hell, even maybe Brandon Graham, about to turn 37 years old. Maybe he's a guy that you say, hey, here's a 1 year deal. It's the least you've ever made. We need depth. We need veteran leadership. Do you think that they really need much more here?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I think if I see a comment here from Yim talking about Shamar Stewart, talking about him if he's there at 14. I think that would be a good investment to make. I think he's a guy that you could put rush inside out. It's going to fill a little bit of that void that was left, and it's going to be one of those high-end talents that could push somebody like Isaiah Land, Darrell Nchami off the roster if push comes to shove come training camp. As far as those free agent names you mentioned, I think that's an interesting conversation because I think then you're still signing a guy who's pushing 30 on a 1 year deal, which is the same situation that they have with four other guys on the depth chart of that position. So that solves nothing for you long term. Just going into this next season, I don't hate where the depth chart's at. I think Isaiah Land is a guy who, if you give more snaps, can prove something. But again, I think the Colts have been pigeonholed into these positions in the past where they expect these leaps from these young players, and they put all that pressure on them. And then if it doesn't happen, then that position just kind of falls flat. We've definitely seen that in the past with some of these guys. Like, don't want that situation to happen with Jalen Carlisle. I don't want that situation to happen with Isaiah Land. I mean, you just have to add competition at that spot. So I think it's good to invest in somebody probably in the draft to solve something long term to really push that position group.
Yeah, and you make a really good point, Noah, because adding a guy to a 1 year deal, I mean, like you mentioned, the only guy that isn't going to be a free agent next season is Laiatu Latu.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do think that, let's see, because Kwity Paye is going into his fourth season. So he did get the 5th-year option confirmed, but that just means that he's going to be a free agent in year 5. Mm-hmm. So this is a big season for Kwity Paye. This is a big one. He's going to need to impress the Colts, probably need to push 10 sacks again, but it's a guy who's gotten you 8 sacks each season, so I think you got a lot of confidence in him. And then, of course, Samson Ebukam. I mean, it sucks that he went down with such a bad injury, but he led the team in sacks and was second in pressures in 2023, only behind Buckner. So this is definitely a group that I I can get excited about. I think that, like you said, though, you want to add someone in the draft, get them on a cheap deal, have them try to develop behind guys like this, work with Charlie Partridge, work with Lou Anarumo.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that
I
idea.
think Samson Ebukam's worth having a conversation about, just with that injury coming back and kind of seeing what that production is going to be like. But for the sake of it's 20 minutes and we've got 6 other position groups to do, we'll save that from another time. I do think he's an interesting twist that you get in that edge room, and I think he's kind of a high risk, high reward kind of situation.
Yeah, and you know what? With that being said, we will go ahead and kick it over to number 6 here. This is a position that probably would have been higher if it wasn't for, I think, a key signing. I think it's an exciting signing, and that's running back. So right now, your depth chart in this regard, let me see here. Yeah, so you're looking at sorry about that. Oh, there we go. You are looking at Jonathan Taylor, Khalil Herbert, Tyler Goodson, and Salvin Ahmed. Okay, now Salvin Ahmed, again, another camp body type guy, maybe a practice squad guy they call up if they need someone on the roster. But this really looks like a solid running back room. I think that you can't pass up someone in the draft because this is arguably the most loaded position group in the entire draft. What are your thoughts on this room? I know Jonathan Taylor really puts this at a much less need because he's so dominant. But what are your thoughts, especially after that Khalil Herbert addition?
Yeah, the Khalil Herbert addition was huge for this. I think this need was up there pretty high that they needed to add somebody. With the addition of Khalil Herbert, I think you get a balanced back. You can play on the field all 3 downs, and at the same time take some of that workload off Jonathan Taylor. I still think there's a need to add here. The reason that I put running back so much lower than some of these other positions that we're going to talk about a little bit later is I just think it's easier to find somebody. I think you can sign somebody during the preseason. You can find somebody during roster cut down day. You can even find somebody during the season to bring in as a street free agent that can come in and be productive. I think there's always running backs available that can be valuable to your room. So that's why it's so low, because I don't feel like the need is necessarily they don't need to do it quickly. They don't need to address this right away. They don't need to spend any valuable resources on doing it. But I think just by the virtue of the position and how that Jonathan Taylor especially has struggled with his durability in the past few years, they're gonna need bodies at the position. I just think they're always easy to find and they're always gonna be out there.
Yeah, and so we'll go ahead and address a few of these here in the chat. So Yim says, would it be crazy to take Henderson? Would it be crazy to take a Henderson in round 2? I think that given the Khalil Herbert signing, I think it would be a little bit of a reach. I think that right now you kind of maybe need a veteran guy or a day fringe day 3 pick, maybe a round 4 guy. But then the Khalil Herbert, this is Rich Wheeler, legendary listener, a legendary viewer. Khalil Herbert signing reminds me of Philip Lindsay. Oof, boy, he did not do anything with the Colts from a couple of years back. I still hope we draft a running back in the mid rounds to develop. That is something that my biggest signing, my biggest draft, like crush, I guess, for running back would be Cam Scatteraboo. I still think that you could get that guy in rounds 3 or 4. I think that Herbert is more. I mean, he's not really a pass catching back. Taylor definitely isn't. Scatteraboo is. He's huge. He's a bruiser, but he can catch the football and run routes. And I just think that he can present so many issues for tacklers. So still fully expect, and we went over, I think it was Devin Neal was another guy. I mean, good Lord, there are so many running backs, and I fully expect the Colts to take one.
Yeah.
Before we even move on here, because this is a room that I really think Jonathan Taylor is going to dominate. I fully expect Khalil Herbert to see action. But do you think that Trey Sermon, not to pile up on the guy, averaged under 3 yards a carry last season, was very underwhelming. Do you think that his departure, because they're not going to re-sign this guy, he might even go unsigned for a while. Do you think that him and Tyler Goodson's lack of production was really like the nail in the coffin for the Colts holding back on getting running back? And now, after a follow-up question, after Khalil Herbert, do you think that they're going to continue adding to this room?
Yeah, for sure. I think it was a big impact on the way Chris Ballard saw the room. I think his interview at the combine kind of mentioned that he was just referencing Zach Moss from 2 years ago and how much that he added to the room. And then without Zach Moss and the same people behind him, they didn't get that production. So it was pretty clear that they needed somebody else in the group. One thing I wanted to say about just the running back room in general is I think you're in a similar position that you are with edge defenders, where you don't have anybody other than Jonathan Taylor locked up after this year. So Khalil Herbert was obviously a 1 year deal. Tyler Goodson, Salvin Ahmed, both on a 1 year deal. And then Jonathan Taylor, even him, he's on a 2 year deal, but he'll have another $15 million cap hit next season, and you could save $13 million of that by moving on from him. So if he's not giving you the production that you want, or you kind of want to restructure your team a little bit and not throw so much into that running back position, then you have the opportunity to move on from him. So it's hard to say that the long-term answer is on the roster also. I mean, Jonathan Taylor's 26, which is still an athletic prime, but we know that for running backs, that prime is shorter and shorter every year. It seems like in the NFL, it's hard to get players that produce consistently after they turn 27, 28. So I think the Colts should be anticipating a little bit of a fall off at some point in the next few years from Jonathan Taylor, and they need to plan for that. And even just then, yeah, adding somebody round 4, round 5, anywhere in day 3, I think you get somebody who you have locked up on a deal who can be productive both filling in this year and going forward in the future.
Yeah, real brief. So, if anybody's thinking about the Colts adding a running back in free agency, first off, Noah is absolutely right. You have to bottle up Jonathan Taylor's prime a little bit. You can't just keep running this dude until he becomes a nub. Eventually, he is going to start to see a little bit of a decline because you got to remember in college he was used on an NFL level. Okay, like as far as his volume, top to bottom from Spotrac, Jamal Williams, more of a bruiser. Gus Edwards, definitely not a pass catching back. Jeff Wilson, Nick Chubb, Naeem Miller Hines. That's a name Colts fans probably miss. I miss his pass catching abilities. But then you have JaMychal Hasty, Dearness Johnson, Cam Akers, Deontay Foreman's more of a bruiser back. So this is an indicator that the Colts are probably going to draft a running back. If they do anything, I don't see them going into free agency doing anything. So, but yeah, it's a very solid group. So now we're going to get to one where the Colts did, yet again, they had another signing. It wasn't a big signing that got me too excited because the guy can't defend the run to save his life. But Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner, they need help. They didn't get it last year. Taven Bryan was used completely wrong. So it's not entirely his fault that he wasn't as productive. Raekwon Davis was a total no-show and a revolving door, and that's defensive tackles. So right out of the gate, Noah, what are your thoughts on the interior defensive line? Obviously, you don't even have to talk about Stewart and Buckner. Really, it's about who they've added, who's behind them. Go ahead and give me your thoughts on the interior here.
Yeah, I think we're getting here into the top 5 position groups that they need to add at. So I think we're getting here into this realm, and I think this is really the first position that we're going to talk about where I'm thinking, okay, do some more in free agency before we get to the draft. That way you're not desperately trying to fill holes once you get into the April draft days. Yeah, you mentioned Grover and DeForest Buckner, both of them pushing 30. We know what they're going to be next year, and the Colts are perfectly fine with that. That's a great starting duo at defensive tackle. But as we know, defensive tackles don't play 80% of the snaps. They rotate quite a bit. So right behind them, you're already worried. You've got Neville Gallimore, who you brought in on the 1 year deal. Like you mentioned, more of a rusher and not so much a stout run defender like you would like to have behind, namely Grover Stewart. And you've got a guy in Adetomiwa Adebawore who's really not played a ton of defensive snaps. He's more of this. I feel like they drafted him knowing he was going to be a project, but it seems like even the projections that they had on him are running a little bit behind in terms of production and what they're getting out of him. So I really don't want to see a position where the Colts have to play Adetomiwa Adebawore around 400 snaps this season. I'm not sure he's ready to take on that workload and produce in that kind of manner. Yeah, and then Phildarius Payne, another one of these names that's a former practice squad guy who's going to come in and compete for a roster spot in training camp. So not somebody that you're going to rely on to take any snaps. Even Neville Gallimore. I mean, God forbid we have DeForest Buckner or Grover Stewart go down for any extended length of time, because then your depth chart's looking really thin. Even Neville Gallimore, who's the guy who has the next most experience, has never really played more than 350 snaps a season, which is less than what you got from Taven Bryan and Raekwon Davis last season. So you need somebody who can step in and fill those roles, I think, both as a pass rusher and a run defender, and just generally to take up those snaps and not be a liability on the field.
Yeah, and so the chat right now is absolutely giving me taking away my answers here. Before I even get to some of those absolutely fantastic comments, everybody, you guys are throwing some real damn good football knowledge in there. Top, we'll just go. I'll just fire off the top 10 names as far as defensive tackles and free agency. Raekwon, this is from number one down, based off of Spotrac. Raekwon Davis, Austin Johnson, John Jenkins, Lakai Fotu, Linval Joseph, who's almost 37, Jonathan Hankins, Taven Bryan, Maurice Hurst, Benito Jones, Daniel Uquale. So not much there. The two guys that stand out the most are space eaters to me, and that's Jonathan Hankins and that's Maurice Hurst. Those guys are basically there to just plug a gap, not allow a ground attack. And, Neville Gallimore is not a good run defender. He just is not a good run defender. His claim to fame was with the Rams when they played in the playoffs this past season. I think they defeated the Vikings, if I'm not mistaken. And then they almost clipped the Eagles. But he had 2.5 sacks. He had 1.5 and then 1. And he played like 45 snaps.
Yeah.
Okay, barely played. So the Rams, he made the most out of his opportunities in the postseason. But the Rams weren't out there going, this guy is awesome. But just to hit these real quick, because we do got to get through more of these. Yim says Kenneth Grant from Michigan. That'd be amazing. I think that the Colts need to start thinking about who's going to replace Buckner, who's going to replace Stewart, okay, because they're both 30 plus. Darius Alexander, that's Toledo. CJ West, that's Indiana. All fantastic. And then, of course, Chet mentions something really interesting. He also says Darius Alexander down there. But defense needs a good backup DT, because the last few years either D-Buck or Grove goes down for a few games, and it's dreadful when one of them goes down. Yeah. All teams do is say, just pound the A-gap. Just run the ball right up the middle. So with this being said, I mean, is this a position that the Colts might draft 2 for? Do you think?
Yeah, I think that's never – I mean, Chris Ballard loves the trenches. He loves those bodies there. I think drafting 2 of them might put you in a weird situation with maybe that giving you some indication of how they feel about Adebawore and his progress and whether or not
he hasn't been good
this season. Yeah, no, he hasn't. He hasn't been good. I mean, he's been running down the field on kickoffs, so maybe you keep him as a special teamer guy. Like that's kind of what he's been to this point, and seeing him on the field during any time taking actual defensive snaps, you're not super impressed with it. And it's not somebody that you are projecting to play a bigger role. I think Neville Gallimore, even the contract that they gave him was around $1.6 million for 1 year with not much guaranteed. That's not somebody that you're expecting to take a lot of snaps, or that's not a contract at least reflective of somebody that you would expect to take a lot of snaps and play a big role. I mean, there's plenty of room to add. There's plenty of snaps to go around. I think you're still trying to put, if you assume Neville Gallimore is going to play in a similar role that he did in Los Angeles and take around 300 snaps, you've still got around 500 snaps that you need to find somewhere with some sort of addition or whether it be free agency or the draft or a massive uptick in production from Adetomiwa Adebawore. He's really your only hope currently on the roster of somebody that can step up and fill that role.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, the Colts cannot allow the depth on the interior defensive line to be lacking. And I think that you will see them address this one way or another. I don't really see a lot of big solutions here in free agency. I mean, 2 of the guys that are in basically the top 10 are former Colts. One of them still with the Colts, free agent, but the other one was dipped out and cut. So we'll have to see, man. That's going to be one to watch. This next one is overlooked. It's not talked about enough, but EJ Speed probably on his way out. Yeah. In fact, fun fact about EJ Speed, we mentioned this in the last episode, he led all linebackers in missed tackles. Okay. No way in hell is he coming back. So this next one is obviously linebacker. Now, your prominent names are the ones that obviously stick out. And you've got Zaire Franklin. You've got Jalen Carlisle. You've got Shagun Alubi, Cameron McGrone, Austin Ajake, and Liam Anderson, who really is more of a special teamer anyway. So when you look at this position group, I will say that minus EJ Speed, it looks pretty bare
Mhm.
outside of two guys. Maybe Inaruma wants to operate with three linebackers every now and again. Grant Stewart, no longer on the roster. So this looks like a position group that needs an impact player, perhaps, dare I say it, a starting level talent.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that's a stretch to say. I'd rank this a little bit higher than defensive tackle, just because we're not sure how often we're going to use that third linebacker. And at defensive tackle, you had two established veterans who have been starters for a long time and been starters at a high level in Buckner and Grover Stewart. At linebacker, you've got Zaire Franklin, and then as much as we like Jalen Carlisle here on this podcast, and we're expecting him to take a leap in year two, he's a fifth round pick that was a converted safety. I'm not sure you want to throw that much on a second year player's shoulders who hasn't played the position for very long. I think that's exactly kind of the situation we've been talking about earlier, where the Colts put too much on a young guy and expect them to take that leap. And if they don't, then the position group kind of flounders. I think the Colts are exactly in that situation at linebacker, where they're putting that kind of pressure on Jalen Carlisle if they were to enter the season with the depth chart currently how it is. Two linebackers essentially. AJ Speed barely came off the field last season. He played around 1,000 snaps for the Colts. So it's hard to project a second-year converted safety, former fifth rounder, to play 1,000 snaps for you in year two. I think that's super strong. So I still think that getting a starter level talent, I think, would be the best thing for the Colts this year and would be the best thing for Jalen Carlisle's development.
Yeah, a free agent that stands out to me is CJ Mosley.
Yeah.
That's a guy that really stands out. If you want a veteran, if you want a guy who can ball, he can play. He can play at a high level. I know he struggled with injuries, but when CJ Mosley has played, he's played really well. But it's pretty bare outside of that. I mean, Matt Judon's more of your rusher. Preston Smith. You've kind of got some of these guys like Isaiah Simmons. He's more on the younger side. Kazir White. Jalen Reeves-Maben. Those guys stand out. But I'm looking at the linebacker rankings here. Oh my God, man! Demetrius Knight Jr. stands out. Carson Schwessinger from UCLA. You could. I don't know if him and Latu played together. I would assume they did.
I would assume so.
But
Yeah.
that's a guy who's probably a second rounder. My favorite one is Barrett Carter from Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
He's a little shorter. My God, can he move? And it's like you need to have more coverage. You just have to. Linebacker is going to be crucial. Now, I will say that I did see a lot of really good things from Jalen Carlisle. I think that he's a little bit, obviously he's not going to be a very big linebacker. Probably could get his ass blown up in the ground game sometimes, like by some of those bigger linemen that are probably going to put him down. But that's a guy that I'm looking to really step up here. He's going to be able to cover for you. He was one of the best at it on the team, as far as linebackers. So with that being said, what do you think the Colts need to do here at linebacker? Do you think that they should, because I think they should address this in the draft. I think you need to get yourself a guy you can develop. But do you think that there is a free agent signing where they're like, no, we're going to draft a linebacker, yeah, but we got to have a solidified name in this linebacking core so that we can hit the ground running? Because the time is up for Ballard, Steichen, and Richardson. But I mean, Lou Anarumo's new, so his clock has kind of reset. But man, they got to make an impact on the second level.
Yeah, you mentioned C.J. Mosley on the free agency market. I think that would be a good veteran presence to add to your room. A couple of names that intrigue me a little bit more would be Kaiser White and Isaiah Simmons. Isaiah Simmons, namely, I think follows that athletic profile, a former safety convert, just kind of things that Chris Ballard has looked for in the past with linebackers. I think that kind of level addition needs to be added. And if you're not talking about a free agent, then I think, go in somewhere in the first 2 days of the draft at linebacker to get somebody who can come in and play significant snaps for you. I like Jahad Campbell at 14, Jalen Walker out of Georgia, maybe even at 14 could be a guy. Then Schwessinger, Barrett, Knight, Jeffrey Bassa out of Oregon. These are all names that I think could be potential additions there at that spot.
Yeah, and you've also got I believe it. Yeah, I believe it's Femi Alodejo. So that's another guy that could potentially make an impact. He also can play edge. So
Mhm.
this. I mean, there's a lot of ways to address this, but I also love that you brought up Jeffrey Bassa. That's a guy that I think is going to be drafted in like the third or fourth round. Maybe somehow someone reaches for him,
Mhm.
but if not, and he fits that profile of where they think he's slotted to draft. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to surprise some people. I really do. He had a hell of a Senior Bowl, and really stood out. So, yeah, we'll have to see. And this is actually something I have to point out from Chet. This is a position Ballard dominates. He just dominates it. He
Mhm.
nails it. He nailed it with Shaq Leonard. He nailed it with Zaire Franklin. To a degree, he nailed it with EJ Speed. You saw some promise with Jalen Carlies. Chris Ballard knows linebacker, and I trust him fully with that position. But this next one, they made a signing. But I love that Noah put this so high because outside of the two
Mhm.
prominent starters, it is a death fall from a cliff as far as who's behind these guys, and it's safety.
Yeah.
Now, if they hadn't signed Cameron Bynum, we're probably talking about this maybe being number two, number one. But this is just to give you guys an idea. I'll actually ask Noah first before I get into the depth chart, especially after that Bynum signing. What are your thoughts on? I guess before we dive into it, Nick Cross and Cam Bynum as a duo out there. What kind of impact do you think those two can make for Anarumo?
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think it's clear Inarumo identified Cam Bynum as the guy. There was a discussion, I think an article came out on PFF talking about how they could have chosen Javon Holland instead. They ended up having kind
Mm,
of a similar contract. Javon Holland kind of compares a little bit to Jesse Bates, who was Lou Anarumo's kind of linchpin back there at free safety and with the Bengals. I mean, I'll just be blunt about this. I hated the safety room going into the offseason. And I like the addition of Cam Bynum, but I still hate the safety room. I think once you get after those first two, I think Cam Bynum's a great starter. I think it's a little bit scary to rely on Nick Cross to continue what he did last season. If there's any bit of a drop off, I think you need somebody that you can turn to motivate him, to push him, to take some of those snaps away in some of the higher pressure situations. And right now you've got Rodney Thomas, Marcel Dabo, and Daniel Scott, and I absolutely hate that trio being the next men up in the safety room. So I know Rodney Thomas has had some success in the past, but I think his rookie year was really
some.
where he peaked and I think that was largely just the ball production he had, where he had some interception fall into his lap, which kind of boosted those numbers a little bit. After that, the tackling has been bad, the coverage has not been good. Marcel Dabo hasn't gotten on the field for any defensive snaps. Daniel Scott hasn't gotten on the field for any training camp snaps. So really, you're in a tough situation there at safety where you need to do something. If you want to be versatile in Lou Anarumo's defense, I think you need the option of playing in some three safety sets, and the Colts don't have the horses to do that right now.
Yeah, and this is a position group. Like we're just going to go through the depth chart here. So Cam Bynum, Rodney Thomas, the second, Marcel Dabo, and then you've got Nick Cross, Daniel Scott. Now here's the thing: there is one name that sticks out to me, and that's Daniel Scott.
Mhm.
Hasn't even been able to see the preseason. Okay, like the poor guy comes out of California. He's already an older draft pick,
Yeah.
and he's a hell of a special teamer. Showed a lot of promise. Um, he's an interesting name because he's incredibly athletic. One of the highest athletic tested players the Colts have drafted in the last 10 years. And if he can stay healthy, there's a chance that he's probably going to just be a special teamer. But there's also a chance he could be a solid rotational
Yeah.
piece. Now, Rodney Thomas, like you said, I mean, God, man, that 2022 season, some of those throws that he intercepted, they were almost like punt returns. So not a lot of confidence there. You look at the safety market. I mean, Justin Simmons, he stands out, but he's probably going to want to start.
Mhm.
Then you've got Demonte Kazee, who's most famous to Colts fans for trying to take off Michael Pittman's head in 2023. Quandre Diggs, that could be a veteran signing that might work out. He might be able to be a rotational piece. A guy that really sticks out to me is very simple. And yet again, it's that familiarity. It's Von Bell.
Yeah.
Maybe that's somebody that the Colts pick up. I just think that this is yet again this just screams draft pick to me. I think that the Colts could potentially dip in the draft here. My question to you, Noah, is do you so I mean you made your feelings felt on the safety room. Do you think that they should address this with a veteran? Do you think that they should bring in a guy that's going to back up like a draft someone when you have Cross who's super young, you have Bynum who's like 26. Do you think that they should rely on a veteran to maybe come in there and back those guys up in case he has to step in, or for just rotational sets?
Yeah, honestly, I think you should do both. I really like the name Von Bell that you threw out, and I think that's kind of a
It's a
no-brainer
good one.
fit. I think we talked a lot about Jermaine Pratt and his relationship with Lou Anarumo. Lou Anarumo's relationship with Von Bell seems pretty similar to the way the two talk about each other and the way that they played in that defense and how it all kind of fell apart without Von Bell and Jesse Bates in the back. You think Lou Anarumo would want a guy like Von Bell back, and he kind of fits in that situation where he would be the direct backup or direct competition for Nick Cross at that other safety spot. That hits the nail on the head of exactly what I was looking for, of being in a situation where if Nick Cross falls off at all, you have somebody who can take some of those snaps. So yeah, I think you could do that. You could sign a guy like Von Bell, who's going to cost pretty close to vet minimum, a similar contract to what you're seeing with Neville Gallimore, Khalil Herbert. Some of those kind of numbers is kind of what I would expect for someone like Von Bell. And then you have room to take somebody in the draft who can come in and be that guy. We know Nick Cross is super young, but he's also in a contract year this year. It doesn't get an option for that fifth year option being a third round draft pick. So I mean this. He kind of has to produce if there's any bit of fall off, and he's going to really require any bit of money. I think his future is up in the air with the Colts. And I think his future is especially up in the air with the Colts if Chris Ballard's not back, because I don't think anybody that else would come in would feel any sort of allegiance to him being the guy that drafted him. So I think it's really put up or shut up for Nick Cross and prove that this past season wasn't a fluke for him.
Yeah, and I love. So this is what I want them to do right here. I think they should pick a. I think they should pick a safety in the second round. I think that you need to get a guy that can potentially even dare I say it, uh, he could develop. A guy like Xavier Watts, guy like Sebastian Castro, Latham Ransom.
Mm-hmm.
Those are guys that all really stick out. Now they're a little bit on the higher end. Do you, after this signing with Bynum, feel like you should take a high draft pick, dude? After that, after Cross, it like Noah and I said, it is just a wasteland. Okay, you can't trust Daniel Scott, just like you can't trust Jelani Woods. It's the same exact thing. It's not saying the player can't play; it's that they can't even stay on the field or get on the field to play. So we'll have to see. That's going to be a position that I think is going to be massive. Um, you know what? One more thing before we move on here. I love this one. I love this one so much. Would it be bad to re-sign Blackman as the third safety? No. I think if he comes back, like this could be another situation where the Colts just let him go out there. Nobody wants to sign him. I think somebody will. But if they don't, I would not mind bringing back Blackman cheap as hell. He's not even going to cost 3.5, 3.7 like he did last year. He'll be even cheaper. Do you think that that could work? Because I even said in multiple articles, if they bring back Julian Blackman, he ain't going to start, but he could potentially serve as a rotational guy. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I've said since they signed Cam Bynum that Cam Bynum always came off to me as what peak healthy Julian Blackman looked like. So I mean that fit made sense. It always made fit or sense for me in terms of schematics when Lou Anarumo came in. The one thing that I don't think it's really common for a guy to be drafted by a team and then test free agency and come back with the tail between his legs and take a little bit of money on a 1 year deal and then do the same exact thing the next year and expect a happy reunion. I'm assuming he does not want to come back to the Indianapolis Colts at this point after the investment that they made in Cam Bynum and how they've made it clear both the past two off seasons how really little they value him and his contribution to the team. So I'm assuming he's going to want to try to find something elsewhere, and I'm sure he's going to find at least some sort of offer, at least similar to what the Colts would be offering. So if I was him and if I was the Colts, I would probably kind of want a fresh start on that and kind of hit the reset button. I think you can find another veteran who can give you the same kind of production that Julian Blackman has in the past for around the same price point, without all the baggage that comes with bringing back a guy who you relied on as a starter at a lesser role.
We're going to have to see, man. That's going to be an interesting position. I think that this next one is huge just because there's so many injuries that happen at this position just along the whole thing, all
Mhm.
five spots. That's offensive line. Now, right now, from left to right, you've got Bernard Ryman, you've got Quentin Nelson, you've got Tanner Bordolini, you've got Matt Gonsalves, we assume, and then you have Braden Smith. Now, right now, the Colts did make a point and an emphasis to re-sign Wesley French and Danny Pinter. Wesley French is exclusively a center. Danny Pinter slots in at right guard, but he is a garbaggio guard. He's not a very serviceable guy at that position. And then after that, it's like you got Josh Sills, you've got Antonio Maffei, just not a lot. What are your thoughts? I'm mostly focusing on, I would say, the interior, mostly the guard spots, but really you could even use maybe a couple swing tackles because you can't put your belief in Jack Wilson, who mostly played
Yeah.
basketball in
Yeah.
college, and Blake Freeland, who might not even be worth a fourth round pick at this point. What are your thoughts in the trenches on the offensive side?
Yeah, so I just put this as offensive line as one position group. I realize it's a little bit more, uh, there's a little bit more nuance to that, whether you're going inside or outside. I realize those are two completely different positions that you're going to be targeting different people for in different spots. But I think the Colts are in a situation where they could use either. I think they could go in either direction and solidify it. It's so high on the needs list because I think they do have a spot that could be up for grabs as a starter. And at the very least, I think that sixth offensive lineman, that swing tackle, is a must have. Whether that ends up being Matt Gonsalves if you find a new starter at guard, or if Gonsalves stays at guard, then you just need to bring in somebody on the outside. Because like you mentioned, Blake Freeland, Luke Tenuta, Jack Wilson, these aren't names that I want to see protecting Anthony Richardson in a do or die year. Yeah, and then Glenn Bass mentioned there, Dalton Tucker
Forgot about
on
Dalton.
the inside, who's played some snaps, but also I think was pretty clear that as an undrafted free agent thrust into a starting role, maybe they should have taken. They didn't have the luxury at that time, but they should have taken their time getting him into the starting lineup because I think his head was spinning quite a bit right when he got in there. On the interior, I don't really feel too bad about the depth. I think Josh Sills has come in and played some okay snaps for you. I think Danny Pinter's a perfectly serviceable backup center, a center number two. And I don't necessarily think you need an upgrade there. Wesley French, I mean, we'll see if Pinter and French, what their kind of guard capability is this training camp. But yeah, Dalton Tucker, Antonio Maffei. I think these are okay names at guard, but you could still add another veteran body there. But I think that big one is that sixth offensive lineman who's going would possibly compete for lineman number five, depending on what they do with Matt Gonsalves.
So this one this has draft written all over it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all over it because they did re-sign two veterans. You have a couple other veterans there. Dalton Tucker, God bless his soul. I mean, undrafted free agent, comes out of Marshall, just an
Mm-hmm.
absolute, like a gritty type of school. And, one guy that sticks out to me, though, is because he has position versatility, and that's North Carolina's Willie Lampkin. He's going to be a day three pick, probably. He can play tackle, he can play guard, he can play center. And that's a guy that I think that will come in and he'll fight for a position. He's really short, though. I mean, I'm talking 5'11", 6 foot tall, very short. He's a thick dude, though, about 290 pounds. He's slotted in as a guard. But I think that it's going to be really interesting how they address this because offensive linemen, I mean, last year I did an article on this, and I think that it was, I don't have it in front of me, but there was a graphic done where they did from first to 32nd, the most consistent offensive lines,
Mm-hmm.
right, that had the same starters and how many snaps they played together. The Colts were dead last,
Mm-hmm.
dead last. And I think that the starting lineup was Matt Gonsalves, or no, Bernard Ryman, Quentin Nelson. I think it was Ryan Kelly, but then it was Matt Gonsalves. It was it was Mark Glowinski. That's right. Mark
Mm-hmm.
Glowinski and then Matt Gonsalves. I mean, and that lineup rotated constantly. I mean, it was moving along, and Gonsalves was playing on both sides at the tackle spot. I mean, God, man, like they really need to solidify this, and they have to figure out what's going on with all these injuries. I know the offensive line, it's very difficult because these guys are taking so much. But real quick, we'll highlight Stats Matt here, the third host of the show. It depends on what you want. Do you think Gonsalves is the guard of the future and then draft a tackle? If you think he's a tackle, draft a guard. That's very fair. I personally think they're going to put him inside. I think that Matt Gonsalves is going to be Will Fries' replacement. I think that your starting lineup is Ryman, Nelson, Bortolini, Gonsalves, and Smith. But we'll have to see. So this last one, we only have 5 minutes, but I think everybody knows where we're going with this. We'll just get to it. Tight end. What a mess of a position right now. So Drew Ogletree is a blocker. Will Mallory is, who knows? Will Mallory is, he caught 4 passes last year. They do not trust him to block. You can just tell. And Jelani Woods, you want him to blossom. The guy is freakish. He's huge, and he can get the pedals moving quickly. He's got a wide catch radius, but like you basically have 2 tight ends.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts? Not on Granson, not on Mo Alley Cox. We're removing those 2. What are your thoughts on who the Colts have right now? And should they panic unless they do something?
I mean, you barely have 3 that
Anyone.
are rosterable. I think at this point, you're kind of struggling to. You are in a situation where you're really, really expecting Will Mallory to take a huge jump. You're really, really counting on Jelani Woods to stay healthy. You're expecting Drew Ogletree to be more than what he is. It's really. I think every offseason, Chris Ballard kind of goes into this draft with a glaring need that that they need to draft and they know they need to address. I think it was receiver last year. Knew that they needed to take that and they were going to take that. It's just kind of a question of how early that was going to happen. You'd like to see them make some sort of veteran addition to, I think, ease that a little bit, because even if you take a guy like Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, Mason Taylor, really any of these guys, I think you need somebody else. I think playing in 2 tight end sets is inevitable. I know there's a lot of talk of them wanting to be in 13 personnel more, where they've got Josh Downs on the field more often, but you're going to be in situations where you're playing 2 tight ends. I don't think any of the tight ends on the roster are ones that you want to play significant snaps. I mean, they were pretty much dead last in production last year, and you lost your 2 top snap getters, so maybe there's a little bit of addition by subtraction there. But really, you need more than one body, and you need a pretty significant investment to really turn things around at tight end.
Yeah, and this is Glenn. Just because we're pressed for time, we'll make this brief. A trade is probably not happening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't think that they're going to be trading. I mean, Michael Mayer has not been what they thought he would be with the Raiders, clearly, because they went and got Brock Bowers. So that's something. And then, of course, Stats Matt here throws it out. Draft a Swiss Army knife, and then you have a backup in line with Drew. You got a backup F with Will. You can't trust Will Mallory. You can't trust Jelani Woods. I mean, those guys are, in my humble opinion, I think that they need to either get one of these guys. They need to get Tyler Warren. They need to get Colston Loveland. I still have faith in Harold Fannin. I really do. I still think that there's a chance there that, okay, his combine wasn't the most impressive. Okay, Senior Bowl wasn't the most impressive. We've seen guys get through both of those things. Okay, so Elijah Arroyo, of course, Mason Taylor. I think Gunnar Helm's completely off the board for the Colts just because he's not as athletic as they probably thought he'd be. But I think you're going to draft a tight end, and then you're going to sign one. And I think that a guy like Gerald Everett stands out. Mm-hmm. I think a guy like CJ Uzama stands out. I think Ian Thomas, on the younger side of things, 28, he's been in the league 7 years. I think he stands out. There's not a whole bunch of depth that you can sign. I think Jawan Johnson was the real big ticket item. But do you think that they should double dip at this position? Because I sure as hell think they should.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can't rely on Jelani Woods to really be anything, and you just kind of hope he's that wild card in training camp that comes out and proves he is something. I think Tyler Conklin is out there as a veteran that could be signed, but I'm not sure that that's the investment that they're going to make, or we probably would have heard at least some buzz about it. I mean, the fit is so obvious that if you're any tight end that's alive and has a pulse, you're going to be on the Colts' radar. I think you should be at this point. I did want to mention, but like the trades that have been popping up. I know like late round pick for Michael Mayer just seems to be the popular thing going around. I'm not sure that he's too big of an upgrade over what you have in Drew Ogletree. I think he's a similar type of player to what Ogletree is. And really hasn't done much in terms of production in the league, and despite the high expectations that he had. So I don't know if you're spending a draft pick to get a guy like Michael Mayer. And then Dallas Goedert, I think we mentioned right at the tail end of the show on Monday about the void years on the end of his contract and how you'd be taking so much money, and you just have to be relying on the Eagles to take so much of that hit during that trade for that to happen. I just don't see that happening. So really, you're running out of options fast. I know you mentioned some veteran free agents that you could add. It's interesting that we haven't heard a lot of movement from any teams at the tight end position. Maybe that's a good sign for the Colts, that if they get into a situation where Tyler Warren's gone, they didn't really like Colston Loveland during the pre-draft process, and they don't end up taking a guy early and nothing seems to fall their way, then maybe there's going to be some of those veterans that are still available after the draft. I think that's really all that they can hope for, right? I think you're pigeonholed at this point to taking a tight end in the first 2 days, which isn't an ideal position to be in, just because rookie tight ends generally don't have a high impact when they get drafted, or in their rookie year at least. And I think Brock Bowers is just the exception to the rule there, and I don't think you can really expect that, even if you're taking a guy like Tyler Warren in the first round. So really, to get any production, I think you're going to have to rely on one of those veterans that come in after, and probably make that signing after the draft when you get closer to training camp and realize, oh man, we're really about to start camp with these 5-6 guys that we had on the roster last year that were already a part of the worst position group in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, man, this is a position where, to put a bow on it, Anthony Richardson needs help. All right, you got to give this guy the most help you can possibly throw at him, and you got Khalil Herbert, continue to solidify the offensive line. They've already done that with retaining a couple guys. For the love of God, you got to give him a tight end. All right, I know he missed some bad throws, but that tight end room was booty. It just was not very good. But yeah, at the end of the day, all of these position groups have got to be addressed. We went from the least important to the most important, but we do have to get to it's a quick one, but it's an important one, and that is the Colts news and rumors. So Ryan Kelly actually answered some questions about his departure from the Colts, and it was a man that you could tell was frustrated when he was answering this question, but he was professional because he's just such a damn good guy. In a nutshell, I think it was time to move on, is what he said. And here's the exact quote, and I am going to fire through this like a cannon. I think it was just time to move on. I think it was some frustrating times through certain years. Obviously, it's no surprise I've had 13 different quarterbacks, keep in mind 9 seasons, dear God in heaven. Since I've been there, so I always envisioned myself playing in one place for my entire career. There was no negative impact or no major event that happened where it really pushed me over the edge. It was just when I left last year and there was no guarantees on my contract, I was a free agent. I was excited. It was exciting for me. I felt like I was okay. It was time for me to maybe check out what else is out there and move on and have a new perspective on this career. So yeah, I can't say there's a specific event. I'll miss the guys in the O-line room and I'll miss a bunch of people there. But in my heart, I just felt like it was time to move on. And I kind of felt that way over the last year and a half. Mm-hmm. That breaks my heart, man, because this is a guy who had 4 Pro Bowls. He had 3 straight from 19 to 21. Absolute monster leader in the locker room, team captain multiple times. What are your thoughts on that quote? I think that, you heard something similar from Grant Stewart. You heard something like this from Ryan Kelly. You've just kind of heard that these guys, almost in a nutshell and, underlying, they're saying that there was a culture issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no issues with what he said. I think he's always going to be a stand-up guy and a pro about it. And I think in terms of how he was feeling, like for a year and a half, the writing was a little bit on the wall. I think them drafting Tanner Bortolini kind of sent a little bit of that message. I think maybe things would have been a little bit different if they had not drafted what everyone clamored to be his heir apparent and his replacement. I think having that guy directly behind you on the depth chart makes things a little bit rough. And kind of helps you see the writing on the wall a little bit more, and opens your mind a little bit more to exploring some of those other options that would be available for him in free agency. And just point blank, the Colts have not been good since Ryan Kelly's been here, like, or since Andrew Luck left, which is most of Ryan Kelly's career here.
Yeah.
As much as it's nice to see our team with rose-colored glasses as Colts fans, I mean, it's not been good by any stretch of the imagination, and I think anyone outside of the Colts organization would admit to that, and anyone that's really taking things realistically inside the Colts organization would admit to that. I mean, players are competitive and they want to win. And if you're in a spot for 9 years and you don't see any big wins coming your way, you're not making any deep playoff runs or any success, I think you're always going to want to chase that. So when the opportunity comes up, and you've got your head poking around in different rooms, you've got other teams who've had a lot of sustained success in the past few years making you offers, it's definitely going to be tempting. So I'm really happy for him that he got a really good offer for a really good team, and I want to see him play some good football and have success.
Yeah, and the Vikings got him for dirt cheap, by the way, 2 years, $18 million. But that's our show, guys. Thank you so much for joining. Of course, the super chat of the day was Matthew Sundberg, but I mean, so many people, contributed. Paul Wilson, Glenn, Chet, Darth Raider, Rich Wheeler, the legendary Rich Wheeler, Stats Matt, Yim. I mean, all of you guys, I think it was Nathan Comanci, Matthew Sundberg, so many people here just joining in. But yes, don't forget to like the Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook. Follow Indianapolis Colts on SI. And then on X, we are at Colts on _SI. Subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle right here on YouTube. Click that bell to turn on notifications. You just never know when in the heck we're going to go live with breaking news. And of course, if you want to listen to the Horseshoe Huddle podcast, all you have to do is subscribe to us on Apple, on Spotify, on Google Play, wherever you listen to podcasts. But that's our show for tonight. I hope, and Noah hopes, and we both hope that you all have a wonderful weekend. I know the weather's been kind of, unpredictable, but hopefully it gets a little bit better for everyone. And we will be seeing all of you again on Monday to talk more Colts football. So have a wonderful weekend, and we'll be seeing you soon.